Hi, and welcome to This Day and Age, where we bring together experts in all things aging, from Holland Home, Faith Hospice, and Atria Home Care. I'm Phil Tower, and we are here together to provide information needed to help you and your loved ones make confident decisions while navigating life's journeys. We are really glad you've joined us, and in this episode, I am joined by estate planning attorney Linsey Gleason from Barnum Law, also financial advisor Steve Starnes from Grand Wealth Management. They are both across from me. Linsey, hello. Steve, hello. Great to have you both here. We are talking about one of those topics that a lot of people hear the phrase estate planning, and I think there are probably a dozen things come to mind. Linsey, I'm going to start with you because you look most primed and ready for this answer.
I'm ready.
Estate planning. A lot of people think about a lot of different things, but when you summarize it, what do you tell people it is?
I tell people that estate planning is walking through the process of putting down on paper your plans for what you want to have happen for your decisions in the event of your incapacity and upon your death. So it's really important to think about both of those things and really put that plan down in writing. If you've got it in your head, that's really not going to cut it. So it's documenting your wishes for the future.
And typically it involves finances, assets, and that's where you come in, Steve, right?
Yeah, that's right. We help clients think about both while they are living, if someone needs to help you make financial and healthcare decisions, how do you want that to happen? What I also tell people is, if you don't come up with your own plan, the government has a plan for you. And most people feel a lot more comfortable putting their own preferences on paper rather than letting someone else they don't know decide things for them. Estate planning also, of course, means what happens to your assets after you die. People often think of estate planning from a practical perspective. I think they think about what happens after they die a lot more than what happens while they're still alive. And both, as you said, Linsey, are really important.
Well, I think one of the biggest questions, and you probably deal with this, Linsey, I think you both deal with this, is when to start. Because I think some people may think, well, if we're in our 40s, we're in the prime of life, we need to focus on saving for retirement and this and that, and you don't normally think of that stage of life. How do you generally advise people?
I tell people you can't start too soon. Your plan will change throughout life as your circumstances change. You'll be making updates. A plan might be different from someone who's in their 80s than it is for someone who's in their 40s, but it still makes sense to start early. I usually say anyone over 18 should start to make decisions about who's going to make medical or financial and legal decisions for you if you're incapacitated or just unavailable, or if it's just convenient. These are also tools to make your life easier. So I work with some families who have kids going off to college and they still want to have that in place. And I work with a lot of young families. They have their first child, and that's a good time to start thinking about who do I want to be the guardian of my child and who's going to maintain those assets. But we do tend to get more intentional about those plans as people age. But it's never too soon to start. It can be too late, but it's not going to be too early.
I bet, Steve Starnes, you hear a lot of people say, I wish I would have started planning earlier, more aggressively saving earlier in my life, the common refrain you hear?
Yeah, there's the adage, the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago, and the next best time is today. And one thing that gets in the way of people making progress doing estate planning, I think, is it's always very important, but it's rarely urgent. And so it's not, frankly, it's not that fun a topic to think about for most people. It's also a hard topic to think about for most people. What I encourage to make progress, what I encourage people to think about is, what do you want to do to celebrate talking with Linsey and going through her process? So Linsey is such a wonderful person guiding people through that process. I've seen her do it. It's awesome to watch, but it's also not a fun topic. So what do you want to do to celebrate? What's the restaurant you want to go to? Is there a bottle of wine you want to open? Like something small. Is there a trip you want to take?
Well, and it brings, let's state the obvious, that planning brings peace of mind because it clears up so many of the unknowns, and it also helps move that whole progress forward. But when we look at this, and I'm glad you said that, it is a bit of a somewhat monotonous but important and slightly complicated process because there are multiple components to an estate plan. So Linsey Gleason, could you help us walk through those key components in every estate plan?
Yeah, absolutely. And Phil, I think you sort of started with a thing that I want every client to leave with. I say when you walk out the door, you're going to have some documents, but what I most importantly want you to have is peace of mind. In addition to that peace of mind, you're going to have a few different pieces of paper. The two components, again, as I mentioned, are planning for the event of incapacity and then planning for death. So in planning for incapacity, there are two relatively simple documents we put together. One is called a durable power of attorney. Mm-hmm. So that documents who you want to be able to make financial and legal decisions for you. And then the other, in Michigan, we usually call it a designation of patient advocate and living will. That's documenting who you want to make medical decisions for you, and sometimes give some guidance about what those decisions will be as well. And then in planning for the distribution of assets after death, we do that with wills and trusts. Some people will use both, some will just use wills, but a trust, we call that a will substitute, and it really is an easy document to clearly outline what you want. There are a lot of misconceptions out there that trusts are just for the very wealthy people and they're all tax driven. But most of my clients use trusts just to avoid probate, and again, to really be able to intentionally and clearly lay out what you want done, who you want to be in charge, who's going to benefit, and what your legacy is going to be.
It's well said. Steve Starnes with Grand Wealth Management. As you heard Linsey talking, a lot of people think they need to have a considerable amount of wealth, but this comes down to, as you said right in the beginning, if you don't plan for this, the government will decide, how those assets are divided, and it's pretty cut and dried, right?
Yeah, and I completely agree with what Linsey said. Sometimes people hear the word trust and they think complicated. They think, I don't have enough money for that. And it really is a great tool to make things easier for you and also make things easier for your family. And that's often how I coach clients to think about this. This is to make things easier for your life, and this is also to make things easier for your kids. I joke with them. I say, well, if you want to make things hard on your kids, don't do any of this.
Yeah. You know what? That is
some people
right on.
Some people take me up on that.
Yeah.
But having the financial power of attorney clearly in place, it's typically the decision stumbling block people encounter is, well, who do I name to make decisions for myself? And a spouse is kind of the obvious first choice, but it's who else if it's not a spouse? Often it's a child, and some people's families are better than others at having a financially responsible person to step into that role. Typically, it should be someone who is financially responsible. Again, this is who you name for your financial power of attorney, and someone who you trust implicitly. Yeah. And that can be difficult. It's easier for some and more difficult for others.
We're speaking with Steve Starnes, that's who you just heard, from Grand Wealth Management. Also Linsey Gleason, Barnum Law estate planning expert. We're talking on this episode of This Day and Age about the process of estate planning. And we've already established that it provides peace of mind. It's really a roadmap for how things will go throughout your life and the end of life with living trust and the different types of trust. But there are also benefits, you guys, when someone passes away, but that guidance is really critical. Can you kind of walk through some of those basic things, Linsey?
Yeah, after a person passes away, if they have done this planning in advance, they've documented what their wishes are. And again, that's the most important thing, I think, for an estate plan. There can be other benefits, tax benefits and things like that, but the most important thing is always what that person wants done will be done. And so if we have that all documented, again, it makes the process really easy for the family. They've got this peace of mind that I'm doing what mom or dad or family member wanted done. And again, it's faster. It's often much less expensive when you just have this piece of paper you can turn to. And one of the other things I say is a component of an estate plan. It's not just the piece of paper, but it's understanding the relationship with the estate planning attorney, the financial advisor, often the accountant. Again, we sort of know who those players are, so it's this seamless process of just walking through what needs to be done in a timely, orderly fashion, and there just aren't these uncertainty questions or mistrust questions. Again, you know who's been empowered to do X, Y, Z. They do it. The assets get transferred, and again, that legacy is really put in place.
That's well said. Steve, is there anything from a perspective of a family member passing on that you see sometimes is a little bit of a puzzle or maybe misunderstood?
Yeah, a couple of thoughts come to mind. One is often a decision you have to make when putting a will and trust in place is at what age do family members inherit money. And what I have seen is it's a big risk to leave a lot of money to younger adults. It can distract them from figuring out what makes them happy in life. And to be even more specific, leaving lots of money to people in their 20s often distracts them from figuring out what they really want to do. And so having a will and trust structure that can delay if you pass away and leave young adult children, that maybe they don't get the money till 25, 30, 35, 40. Depends on the plan. It depends on the family. A person like Linsey should be able to coach you through that.
I'm really glad you said that, because that's the human component we don't think about so much. Because there are some 25-year-olds who probably could handle some type of inheritance. And there are some 45-year-olds who probably could not. And it's really about the maturity. It's about understanding. And it's also, I want to ask you, Linsey, isn't it about that family being open and honest about money and how these things are passed on? That process is a challenge sometimes.
Yeah, absolutely. The estate planning process, it really can be a personal thing where, again, not every 25-year-old is created the same. And again, people have different goals, and it can depend on the amount of wealth we're talking about transferring here. And again, there can be other benefits from estate planning, like holding money in trust until a beneficiary is older can give them some protection if they were to get divorced. We've got a mechanism to help protect some of that money. And so the person making the gift can really make sure that they're seeing their monies used the way that they want to. And putting in place these decisions about at what age are these distributions going to be made, again, it does require this person to really think thoughtfully and honestly, like, are my beneficiaries ready? What is my goal, my long-term goal here? And we document that, we put it in place, and that's why we revisit an estate plan from time to time, because things do change.
And that the things can change, and that's most people get a little nervous about putting things so formally in documents because they're like, is this perfect for all time? It might not be. And what happens is, if you put it on paper and you sign your name, either you're going to feel that peace of mind or it's going to bother you. And if it bothers you, you just go have a nice another conversation with Linsey and you update it and change it. And a little easier said than done, but it can be changed and updated. And for most people, that's just a normal part of the process.
Okay, this impacts both of you guys, and this might be the toughest question, because it is one of those things that really the onus is on the parents in that estate planning process. But Steve Starnes, Linsey Gleason, when should mom and dad have this conversation with the kids? Because sometimes it's too soon, it's overwhelming, it's complex, and sometimes if they wait too late, there might be cognitive issues that are compromised. I mean, it's a balancing act, but I know both of you have great expertise in counseling the people you work with. I'll start with you, Linsey, on the toughest question maybe so far.
I think that is the toughest question, and will probably be one of the toughest questions for my whole career. And again, not every family is the same. I work with some clients who just aren't going to have a conversation with their kids about wealth. And that's okay. Again, if we document what you want to have happen, we can still put in some safeguards that a beneficiary who might not really be prepared is still going to have some guidance and support when that time comes to administer the assets. For a lot of families, it really can be helpful to have the beneficiaries a little bit better prepared, whether that's just understanding the wealth that they're going to inherit, or maybe more importantly, understanding the parents' goals. And the thing that we always really bring this back to is how this impacts a person's life is more important, I think, than what happens after they've died. So having, again, a good plan in place and an understanding of how you want assets used for your benefit on your behalf when you're living, I think, can be more important. So those conversations really, I think, are important. Like, if I can't make my own financial decisions, who is going to do that? And how do I want to see this money spent while I'm living?
And one of the things that makes this so hard for families to figure out is money is an emotional topic for all of us. Even us professionals, if we really are honest with ourselves, we make emotional decisions about money. And it's important to recognize that I often, every family is different, as Linsey said. it's not a decision between share nothing and share everything. For most people, they don't want to share everything. They don't need to make sure their goals are understood. It's have what information do you need to share so that if someone needs to help you, they know how to help you. Because the alternative is you may need help and someone doesn't really know what exactly you would prefer, and they're going to come in and try to help, but it's going to come across like they're just telling you what to do. And no one that I have met really feels like, please come in and tell me what to do with all my money and my most important decisions. None of us would react well to that.
Yeah.
And so that having the talk, this is like the adult talk, I think to take a little pressure off of it, think about it as a series of conversations that aren't necessarily like you just opened a book and here it is. It's touch on it here and there. Take the pressure off. You don't have to solve every problem in one conversation.
Steve Starnes, Grand Wealth Management, Linsey Gleason from Varnum Laws. We're talking about the process of estate planning on this day and age. I'm Phil Tower. We appreciate you walking us through this process, you guys. And I think the other thing I think about keeping children in the dark, especially adult children, is they may be overwhelmed if they don't know what they're inheriting and how all the pieces work together. But this, again, underscores how important it is to have a Linsey Gleason on your team and a Steve Starnes, because after mom and dad are gone, there's that guidance. I mean, we all need a Yoda in our life at some point. And both of you are far better looking than Yoda and much younger. But more importantly, to be there to answer those questions, because maybe that's not the best question to put before your uncle who, is trade stocks by day, or, a family relative. Is that a part of what you do at Grand Wealth Management? I know it's what you do, Linsey.
Yeah, we ask our clients to not share their financial picture with the other people in their life, but rather the people who are in place to make decisions if they need to, that they at least know who we are and that we're a part of the picture. And so that if they do find themselves needing to step in and help, we can be a resource, because we have a very good understanding of what is important to our clients. Similarly, Linsey, you would know where all the pieces are and why beneficiaries and titles are set up the way they are. And we can be a great resource at making that easier for families.
All right. I may have misrepresented that as the toughest question. Part two of the tough question. The ability to make financial decisions as one ages, and cognitively, their ability to process and think rationally and think wisely about those financial decisions long term, and even decisions of, I can no longer live independently on my own. I mean, these are really important things, as we talk about on this podcast, navigating life journey and doing it confidently. It's really important to be aware of that. But Linsey, Steve, mom and dad are stubborn. Letting control of the reins is really hard. I've seen this happen in families. I have had friends who've agonized this process over and over again. Help us just with a little wisdom on how to do this and how to at least anticipate this conversation.
Yeah, that is definitely hard. But if the planning has been done earlier, again, there is that peace of mind that, all right, this is who mom or dad really wanted to help, either to assist to make these financial decisions. And they've done the planning. So, if they've already been working with Steve and they know that their assets are aligned in the way that they want, again, the transition doesn't have to be as difficult, because what you're doing is continuing to respect mom and dad's plan. You're not coming up with a new plan. You're just making sure that's still being implemented. So if we've already had those conversations about, if this happens, what do you want? Again, then it's a little bit easier, and the kids feel like, I'm not coming in here and taking away mom's freedom. I am helping to implement her plan. So that really can help. It doesn't mean it's easier. And what I always try to do is make sure my clients are able to make their own decisions, really as long as they can. We're not trying to take away someone's ability to make their own decisions, but we really start with having that support network in place and try to make that transition as smooth as possible. And if they get to the point where they really don't want to or can't be involved anymore, again, now we're just implementing the plan they've already put in place.
Yeah, and it comes back, challenge here comes back to when you're making financial decisions, it is culturally common for us to be judgmental about that. And so then you add the complexity of parent, child, that's where you bring the psychologist into the room to further help address this challenge. So the goal is, as Linsey said, it's to help someone, to make sure the structure's in place to help someone do the things that they would want to do anyway. And sometimes that means spending money on things that son or daughter wouldn't prefer. Sometimes it means giving monies to charities that those wouldn't necessarily be the priorities for the son or daughter. But it's having some understanding of what those priorities are and helping the family get comfortable with, we're going to let mom and dad do the things they want to do because that's the way this should happen. My grandmother had dementia, and one of the best lessons I learned on that example is she went shopping at the mall with my mom and really got her eye focused on this $800 necklace. And my grandmother at 90 years old with dementia did not need another necklace. Judgmental. My mom and I would agree with that. My mom let her go ahead and buy it. And for some people, $800 would bust their budget. And they perhaps shouldn't do that. But fortunately, for my grandmother, that wasn't going to change her financial security. And so to let someone make the decisions that they want to make is part of the process that makes it a lot easier for people to get over their stubbornness or get past being stubborn as they feel more comfortable that they're going to get to do the things they want to do.
This, I think, applies, and that's really good wisdom. Thank you, Steve. This applies to both of you, but as people age and as mom and dad age, and I think we probably have seen this far too frequently, scams can invade their lives where at least well-meaning people may purposely mislead mom and dad or maybe take them in a direction they should not go, or maybe they're just completely scammed. Somebody calls and scams them. How do you advise your clients, Linsey? And I know, Steve, sometimes you may see this show up in a strange portfolio decision, or Steve, I'd like you to move all of my stuff into cryptocurrency. I mean, how do you prepare for this?
Yeah, and Steve actually probably sees this even more than I do, but it happens all the time. Unfortunately, this is a really real dilemma that we're having in society right now. Some well-meaning people and some very not well-meaning people. And having, again, the documentation in place of when kids are able to help step in to assist with or to make financial decisions can really help. What we often will start with is allowing a child named as an agent and a power of attorney to review bank statements so they can start to see if there are some things that are really out of the ordinary. Because you know, a lot of people, especially, people who are living in a facility and their spending habits tend to be pretty regular, but then if you start to see some really huge donations to a charity they've not donated to before, or again gifts to certain people, again you can start to try to have that conversation and find out what's going on here, and that will really help to uncover it. And there are times when we do need to fully transition management of the checkbook to someone else, just because to protect the financial security of an individual.
You see this often, Steve?
Yeah, I've seen people who we would probably all agree are very competent, very capable people still be scammed. So you can imagine how much more challenging this becomes when people, their capacity declines. I don't have the perfect answer here. I think having someone in the passenger seat who can monitor bank accounts perhaps can be helpful, as long as there's an understanding, like parent is driving the car and whoever's monitoring is just simply sitting in the passenger seat to kind of grab a hold of the wheel if needed. The other piece is there's a difference between being scammed out of $1,000 and being scammed out of, to your example, taking all your money and moving into cryptocurrency or another major decision. It's having the right financial professional in place. Hopefully they see their role as helping you monitor that. So they have a process. If you have that decision, like you call with that request that doesn't fit just the plan you've already talked about, the values you've already shared, they have a process for helping you avoid making that poor decision.
Yeah. And hopefully that relationship is there where they'll call you first.
Right.
As opposed to say, okay, I'm just going to do this, and and do that in the background. And as Linsey said, that is such a powerful tool to be able to have an adult trusted child look at the bank account, to keep an eye on it. And it's just that, as you said, just kind of your lifeline and your guide to make sure those scams aren't happening, because they pick up phones. Older parents are carrying cell phones, they're getting texts, and scams are so prevalent and so easy to find.
I often compare, so going to the doctor, it can be challenging to hear everything the doctor says. They're talking quickly, they're using terms that aren't familiar to us. It is often helpful to have someone go with you to the doctor and help listen, right? Help make sure you communicated well, help make sure you understood the doctor all right. I often, before there is really a problem in a family's life, say, will you please introduce us to that family member who might help you? And if I detect this person might need some help here in the near future, will you please bring that person with you to the next meeting just to help listen? I want to help you set the right tone for how this could go.
Very well advised. I am here with Steve Starnes, Grand Wealth Management. You just heard him speaking. Linsey Gleason, also with Varnum Law. She's an expert in estate planning. And you guys, as someone listening to us on this episode has not begun this process, but it's on their mind, for each of you, can you help guide them in terms of what qualities to look for in estate planning specialist, an estate planning attorney, and someone almost as good as you, Steve Starnes, as at Grand Wealth Management? Linsey, I'll start with you. What should they look for in a capable, qualified estate planning attorney?
The needs a client could have might depend on the complexity of their situation and their net worth. We kind of talk about estate planning in two different camps: tax planning and not tax planning. So for high net worth people, you definitely want to be looking for someone with deep expertise in estate planning. Really, that's all they do. A smaller solo practitioner likely can do a very good estate plan for someone who doesn't have tax planning needs or transfer tax, high net worth stuff. If you're in that camp, you really want to look for someone, a dedicated estate planning attorney. But I think you want to know that person. I think it's really most important to feel comfortable with that person who's going to be your advisor. Because like I said, we are asking difficult questions. We're asking about, you need to tell me if you have any children who have substance abuse problems or are spendthrifts. And it's stuff that you're just not going to bring up to someone you don't feel comfortable with. And that means your advisor can't plan fully. So you just want to make sure you have a comfort level and are going to be able to have a rapport, and think about that person working with your children too, because that's the normal transition. I'll do the plan for mom and dad, and after mom and dad pass, I'm often working with their kids. And so you want someone who's going to be able to have that continuity. And whether that's an individual or a law firm where they have some planning in place at the law firm itself for generational planning. Who's going to be there if I'm going to retire in 5 years and just someone's going to come through all my files in the dumpster? That's maybe not the best continuity to have someone there who can help your family in the future too.
Well, and you brought up a great point, and I know, Steve, you will concur with this. Even if somebody says, go with Linsey Gleason at Varnum, she's great, you need to have that initial conversation, because maybe there's not a good fit, or maybe there's something else where you'd say, I'm going to recommend this person for you. And generally speaking, I don't want to speak out of place here. That's typically a free consultation to get them in the right place. Is that right?
Yeah, I'm always happy to have an initial conversation to kind of say, right, what do you need and who's the right fit for you? And sometimes if you do have a specific need, I might refer you to somebody else who I just think is going to be a better fit for your family, and I'm happy to do that.
Steve Starnes, when it comes to managing money, obviously you've been doing that for some time at Grand Wealth Management. What would you advise those listening to look for? Yeah,
I think whether it's finding a financial advisor or an attorney, it's have that initial conversation, and do you get a sense this professional you're talking to is taking the time to understand what's important to you, what your values are? And that's kind of first step. Do you have a comfort level with that? From a financial advisor perspective, I would ask the financial advisor, are you acting in a fiduciary capacity? That is, are you legally required to act in my best interest? Because some people who call themselves financial advisors are really, they don't have to act in your best interest. They're financially incentivized to sell you something. Mm-hmm. And the last thing I would say is whether it's an attorney or a financial advisor is ask what their credentials and education and experience are. And because doing it well, whether you're an attorney or a financial advisor, if someone's got credentials and experience and education in that field, you're likely to get better technical advice.
And most importantly, this process, once done and in place, as we established right in the beginning, brings confidence, it brings peace of mind. There is a price for it, but that is a price that will pay lifelong dividends after you've done that. There's no question about it. I want to thank you, Linsey Gleason, Varnum Law. Always enjoy hearing your wisdom. Steve Starnes, Grand Wealth Management, thank you as well. And most importantly, if those of you listening are ready to get started or want to learn more about this process we've just had a conversation about, estate and financial planning, you can reach out to Linsey at Varnum Law, Steve at Grand Wealth Management. Their contact information is found in the resources section on the page for this podcast, which is thisdayandage.org. Again, that's thisdayandage.org. Once again, for This Day and Age, I'm Phil Tower. Thank you for listening.